the Friday edition of Mr. Irrelevant, presented by Door County Distillery. I'm Alex Strouf with you from the Gruberl offices. One call, that's all studio at the Avenue in beautiful downtown Milwaukee. Producer Tiny Hands, as always, back at the Everlight Solar Studio in downtown Madison. That, of course, is Hunter Vaughn, better known as. You can get me on Twizzler, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at Alex_Strouf, Strouf, if you want to connect that way. A few things to get into today on a Friday. I'm feeling good, by the way, man. Weather's good. Going to be a fun weekend. I got a bachelor party for one of my best friends this weekend, so I'm sure I'll be up to all sorts of good stuff. But we're 10 days away from the start of Packers training camp. Want to dive into that. I have a list for you today. I got very creative. I have a list for you of 10 players on the Packers roster that have the most approved in training camp. So essentially, to boil that down into an idea is some of them positional battles, some of them, are looking at some of the different, roster cuts, somebody that might be close to maybe not making the roster. So we'll get into that a bit later. A big event at AmFam Field yesterday as the Brewers fall 1-0 to the Pirates. They dropped that series 2-1. But the phenomenon that is Paul Skeens, just a terrific performance for him. And I wanted to dive into that a little bit because he just lit him up, right? He was pulled out after 7 innings. And number one, I hate that, but we'll also get into he's kind of a spectacle at this point, right? Like Shohei Ohtani was and still is a spectacle in Major League Baseball. Paul Skeens is becoming that. And I didn't hate what he did to the Brewers yesterday. I'll tell you why in a bit. And of course, we'll wrap up the week as we always do what we learned. So let's start with this though. Because I like Friday vibes to be high, but this feels like how I was woken up today, which will be our first topic, which is around Aaron Rodgers talking at whatever golf outing he's doing. I assume the one in Lake Tahoe he does every year. But I was woken up this morning about 6:30 a.m. with an awful cramp in my right calf. Sometimes you get those, and you just try to point your toes at your head and hope it goes away. And when I saw this video of Aaron Rodgers talking about the Raiders, right? He's out in Nevada. There's a Raiders publication asking him questions about Luke Getsy, who's now with the Raiders, the former Packers quarterback coach, former Bears offensive coordinator, who's now reunited with Adams in Vegas. Asking him the expectations of Getsy and then what he thinks Davante can do in Getsy's offense. And it's a very short clip. I only want to play you what he said about Davante Adams. Listen closely. Here's Aaron Rodgers talking about the now Raiders receiver, Davante Adams.
I love Davante. I can't wait to play with him again.
Great.
I can't wait to play with him again, Rodgers says. Okay, well, let's think about the options. Summer Olympics this year. There's no football in the Olympics. Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams are not representing the U.S. in the Olympics. Okay, that can't be it. They're both in the AFC. Okay, maybe they'll bring back the Pro Bowl. Oh, wait a minute. No, that's more flag football, and Rodgers typically doesn't play in that, and Adams is a veteran now. He usually doesn't play in that, so that can't be it either. Oh, okay, maybe Davante Adams will be traded to the Jets. Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think that's happening. Okay, Rodgers' contract in New York is up after this year. Maybe he goes to Las Vegas. Maybe. But similarly to the calf cramp I was awoken with about 6.5 hours ago, this just doesn't really make sense. I'm hydrated. I haven't drank a lot this week. I've eaten well. I don't know where the cramp came from. Similarly to I don't know where Aaron Rodgers' reasoning of playing with Davante Adams again came from. Hunter, let's listen to it one more time from Aaron Rodgers. It's a quick few seconds of him on Davante Adams while golfing, walking the golf course with a reporter from Vegas Sports Today.
I love Davante. I can't wait to play with him again.
Great.
So I am struggling to connect the dots of what Aaron Rodgers means by this, right? The easy conclusion to jump to is the Jets are going to trade for Davante Adams. Great. What assets are they giving up? Why would the Raiders trade Davante Adams? I understand they're not really in win-now mode, but do you really want to give up Davante Adams? Can the Jets even afford Davante Adams? That's something I haven't even looked into. I would assume probably not. So Aaron Rodgers, once again, playing this role of puppeteer, or attempting to, when in reality, every wish he's made, every demand he's made hasn't really worked out, right? Like, think about since he's left Green Bay all of the demands he made when he got to New York, and they followed through on them. I'll give them that. So maybe that's the one thing you can say. Maybe Davante and Rodgers end up together in New York if we definitively take Aaron Rodgers at his word, which we have learned not to do. He's asked for Allen Lazard to get paid. He did that, and he stunk last year. He was not very good. Randall Cobb ended up in New York. Of course he did. Billy Turner was in New York. Adrian Amos was in New York. When you think even back to the Green Bay days, all the demands he made, they just never worked in his favor. When Aaron Rodgers tries to play GM, it doesn't work. Now, this is a little bit different. Davante Adams is still one of the best wide receivers in the entire NFL. He is still one of, he is Aaron Rodgers' debatably best target he's ever played with. Of course, up there with Jordy Nelson in terms of what they accomplished together. I don't see a path in which this happens is what I'm struggling with. And I do care because clearly it caught my attention enough to talk about it. But I struggle with okay, what does he mean by that? Right? I'm so used to with Aaron Rodgers, especially when he was a Packer. Now it's been a few years. Reading between the lines of everything he says. He didn't say, I can't wait to play with him. Again, on accident. So what the hell does he mean by that? It just bothers me. And it shouldn't probably anymore because he's not our problem anymore. I'm watching The Ex-Girlfriend a little bit too much. But it bugs me. And I don't see a realistic scenario in which this occurs, especially this year. I don't see any reason why the Raiders would move on from Davante Adams. And obviously Rodgers isn't leaving New York this year. So I can't wait to play with him. Again, it's just such a bold statement that holds no weight to me, Hunter.
I think a lot of Aaron's actions with the Jets has been because of what Tom Brady was able to do with Tampa Bay. And I don't think Aaron understands that, so many of the moves that Tampa Bay made were still with the mindset of, yeah, we're going to bring in Gronk because he's friends with Brady and they have good chemistry, but it's because he's still a really, really good tight end and he's going to help us win games. We're going to bring in these guys that are going to help us win games. Aaron's just bringing in his buddies because he wants his buddies to play with them, and he thinks that they're the best thing ever, not understanding that they're all old and washed, and he actually needs guys to help him win games. And I think that's the difference, is that Aaron just wants his buddies to be buddies with him in New York, and not, I want guys that are going to help this team win right now the way that Tom Brady did. And I think that's where the issue is for him. He thinks he's Tom Brady, and he really isn't.
Thinks he's Tom Brady, but he really isn't. Yeah, okay. I see where you're coming from on that, Hunter. I do. I don't even know if that's that, because I don't think Tom Brady ever had the ego that Rodgers has. Right? Rodgers just assumes he'll say something and it will happen, whereas Tom Brady, actions speak louder than words, pay cuts, and he won, right? And don't get me wrong, Aaron Rodgers is debatably the most talented quarterback I've ever watched. I think Mahomes is right there with him. I'm young, so I didn't see the Marinos and the Elways as much. I know they're up there too, and obviously Favre in terms of talent, he just made a lot more mistakes. Rodgers and Mahomes are the two most talented quarterbacks that I've watched a lot of, essentially the entirety of both their NFL careers. But he doesn't win to the level that Tom Brady does, and he doesn't do the same things that Tom Brady did. So I get your point. I just think this is more ego-driven than anything, which is it is what it is, right? Aaron Rodgers deserves to have an ego to a point. He's a 4-time MVP. He's an amazing quarterback. He's a Super Bowl champion. You can't take any of that away from him. But when you say a comment, so I don't even know what the word is. Sly? So sly, I can't wait to play with him. Again. It makes you. He's the ultimate pot stirrer. I'll give him that. But I don't see a realistic ending to this where it ultimately ends up with Rodgers and Davante playing in the same uniform in 2024. I don't know why this caught my ear as much as it did, Hunter, but it does bother me.
Well, you're so used to anytime Aaron says anything, okay, we've got to react to it because that was really the policy around here, if we're being completely honest, and rightfully so because he drove a lot of the attention with things. But you need to have an ego to be a quarterback. I just think Aaron's ego is so big that he then thinks that he is Tom Brady from that sense of well, I do all of these things to help this team win, and I'm doing all of these things when anybody from the outside is seeing it and understanding like, nah, man, you're not. And you're not doing those things, and you're not the same type of quarterback, and you're not helping your team win in the same way, and understanding that the sacrifice is, okay, I'm not going to make quite as much money, and I'm going to let the front office people bring in highly talented players to help me win, and I just want my buddies who are still solid, but they're not nearly as good, and think that it's the same sort of a thing.
Sure, and I get that, but this isn't going to happen. And if I'm
absolutely
wrong, we can
not,
cut
it
this
won't.
and say I'm wrong, but it's not going to happen. And maybe if Rodgers has a solid year this year, he ends up a free agent next year. He goes to Vegas. It's Rodgers, Adams, and Vegas, which would just be a total disaster. But
owned by Tom Brady, by the way, or partially owned.
Well, it will be, right? So Tom Brady, who is he teaming up with? I did read this. He's going to buy like 18% of the team?
Yeah,
right?
I don't remember who exactly he's with, but yeah, he'll be partial owner of the Raiders. So who knows? Then maybe he can really try and be like Brady.
Is Tom Brady going to get inducted into the Hall of Fame as a part owner of a franchise? That's weird to me. Because I just kind of saw the headline, and I wasn't shocked by it. I figured Tom Brady would eventually get into professional sports in some capacity. It's cool it's in the NFL. But does that mean when he gets the gold jacket put on him, he will actually be also the Raiders minority owner of the Raiders?
Well, Jerry Jones got put in as current owner of the Cowboys. Like, that's not unprecedented.
Okay, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was just a couple of years ago he went in.
All right, good to know. All right, let's go to happier things. It's Friday. Let's kick this thing up a little bit. We're just 10 days away from training camp, July 22nd. In Green Bay. That's a week from Monday. I will be there. We are with you now. I just found this out before the show. We will be with you on 94.5 ESPN Milwaukee and 100.5 ESPN Madison that day from noon to 2. So we've got a little bit of an expanded show the first day of training camp live from Green Bay. We're with you from 12 to 2. We get to do radio. We will also, of course, do the video stream as we always do on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We'll be with you a couple minutes earlier. And we'll be with you a couple minutes later than we typically are. We're leading you right into Kyle Bruston-Nortman, which I will hang around for. Rumor has it I might attend the owners' meetings or the shareholders' meetings that day. Hunter, I don't know if I told you this. So Kyle Wallace of Kyle Bruston-Nortman, weekdays 2 to 5, ESPN Milwaukee, 2 to 4 on ESPN Madison, the show I produce on a daily basis. Kyle Wallace is a shareholder, and he got 4 tickets sent to him. But the shareholders' meeting, which was initially scheduled for noon, got moved back to 3 p.m. So Kyle theoretically will be on the air when the shareholders meeting occurs. Kyle would like to attend. I feel like I could probably sneak out and attend with him. I am not an owner. I've never been a shareholder, but he has extra tickets to bring other people. So I've kind of hitched my wagon to it. I think I want to go to the shareholders meeting, see what Mark Murphy has to say in his final shareholders address. So I don't know if I told you this, Hunter, but like, that's kind of an exciting thing. I don't know if I'm going for sure. I'm going to try to weasel my way in, but I think it would be like a cool thing to attend. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But that's what's on the docket, July 22nd.
I mean, look, if it's exciting for you, then great, man. I don't get it. Like, I honestly, like, as a Cowboys fan, I would not go and get a ticket to go and sit in the stands in 80-degree weather, probably it will be, and listen to Jerry talk about the state of the team and, like...
Well,
like,
it's inside. It's in the air conditioning.
Okay, still. Like, I'm just not doing that. Like, I don't get it. Packer fans are different, I know, and it's just weird. Like, I just find it very strange. So go ahead, man. I say it all the time, but as long as you're honest about the fact that it is a little weird, I'm fine with it. If you try and completely defend this, that's where I'm going to have an issue. It's the same way I feel about you with WWE.
Well, hold on.
So
I'm an owner by association. WWE is as hot as it's ever been. By the way, July 22nd, Hunter, speaking of WWE.
Oh, jeez.
Live from the Resch Center, the night of Packers training camp opener. Live from the Resch Center across the street from Lambeau Field, or the Resch Complex, Resch Expo, I think it's now called. Monday Night Raw, WWE, that night in Green Bay.
Great.
So
congratulations.
A little doubleheader for those of you wrestling fans. You can do training camp and Monday Night Raw. Well, I am technically an owner of the Green Bay Packers by association if I attend this. So that's why I'm trying to weasel my way in so I could change my Twitter bio to Packers owner by association. I don't know that that's technically how that works, but that's how I'm going to make it work. So anyway, so 10 days. I mean, look, there's a ton of excitement around training camp, and there should be, right? Football season's here. We're less than 2 weeks away. We're 10 days away from the start of training camp, which is really exciting. I mean, it's the first opportunity you get to look at some of these rookies, at least up close as a fan, right? The media only got to see 3 of the OTA practices. You get to see Jordan Love in a football helmet for the first time since January's loss to San Francisco. That's exciting. What steps have these wide receivers taken? Are they running crisper routes? Are they faster? You know, is the vertical up a little bit for guys like Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Doubs? Those are all things I'm super intrigued to see come in next week. And you can only take so much away from one practice, but as we roll into the preseason games and some of those joint practices, which Matt LaFleur apparently loves because they scheduled 3 of them this year, you get a real look at like what these guys are made of. And as we always talk about, the expectation is this is a playoff team. This is a team that should be competing for the NFC North title. They should be a double-digit win team. So when it comes to training camp, this should look like it did, 6 years ago. When this team was in 6 years ago was actually a bad year. 2018 was not a good year. But 10 years ago, let's say, right? When this team was constantly winning 12 or 13 games, was always in the running for a top seed in the NFC, and was a real Super Bowl contender. The Packers probably aren't quite there, but they are much closer to that than they were a year ago, when there were so many question marks and there was no expectations, and you weren't exactly certain what the Green Bay Packers would be in 2023. In 24, there's expectations, right? Double-digit wins, playoff team, at least a wild card team, if not winning the division. You should still own the Bears. You're going to have a couple of really fun games against Houston, Miami, and San Francisco, which will be really good tests over the course of this season, and Philadelphia, not to mention in Week 1. So it's just the first step to get us to football season, which I know, at least for me as a Wisconsinite and a Green Bay native, like this is what I live for. Is July 22nd through the Super Bowl. That is the highlight of my year. I love all the other sports. We'll talk Brewers in a little bit. But I love the Bucks. I love the Badgers, both football and basketball. And I like watching Marquette play hoops too. But there is nothing like Packers season. And we are only 10 days away. When your head hits the pillow tonight, you wake up, we're into single digits until we can start talking about a real product. When we can start talking about real things. Crazy plays. Jordan Love throwing a football into a net. You know, like, I know it's not a real game. I understand it's not the NFC Championship. But knowing that when I wake up tomorrow on Saturday, I can already count on 2 hands how far away we are from real football, consuming real football. I'm ready to run through a brick wall, dude. It's exciting as hell. 10 days away from training camp. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to tell you the 10 players for the Green Bay Packers with the most approved come training camp. 10 days away, 10 players with the most approved in training camp. I like the list I put together, too. We'll see what Hunter thinks on the other side. But first, got to tell you about Door County Distillery, which, of course, is the presenting sponsor of Mr. Irrelevant. Door County Distillery, locally produced, handcrafted, and award-winning spirits made locally in beautiful Door County. If you're going up to Door County this summer, you got to stop in at their place in Carlsville. You can do the tour. You can do the tastings. You can see the unique, like, one-off bottles they have available there. But if you're not going to Door County, bring Door County to you, whether in Milwaukee, you're in Madison. Door County Distillery is available everywhere statewide. It's affordable, and it's delicious. It is better than everybody else. Whether you're a cherry person, right? Door County known for their cherries. Try the cherry vodka or the cherry brandy. If you're a whiskey person, the 27-time gold medal award-winning single malt whiskey, the bourbon, the rye. Whether you like that, if you're a gin person, they've got that beautiful green bottle of gin. They've got the blue bottle of vodka. Check out their website. Highly recommend. Find the retailer nearest you, as well as check out a ginormous list of unique cocktail recipes that'll help elevate whatever you got going on this weekend. For me, it's a bachelor party. Bringing up some brandy and some vodka. We're going to get after it a little bit. DoorCountyDistillery.com. 60-second break. When we come back, the 10 players with the most approved in Packers training camp, which starts in 10 days. That's next. It's Mr. Relevant. I'm Alex Strouf. I'm back at the great Door County Distillery here in Carlsville with my friend Rob from Door County Distillery. We're making, it seems like a summer drink here, Rob, a Cherry Cosmo.
Exactly. Just our twist on a regular Cosmo. Obviously Door County, so have to stick some cherry into it.
Have to stick some cherry into it with the cherry vodka from Door County Distillery, made with local cherries, right?
Yep, made with Montmorency cherries we're known for here in Door County.
I love it. Let's get to it. What do we got to do?
All right, so first, obviously the cherry vodka. We're gonna add 3 ounces of that. Next we'll go to triple sec. 1 ounce of that.
Need it for Cosmo.
This is actually just cranberry juice. 1 ounce of that. Half an ounce of the lime.
The Boston Shake, I've
Make sure
learned.
it's, ready to go.
That's such a cool little trick.
Shake it up. Shake it till you feel like it's shaking well enough. Strainer.
I like that color. That looks like summer. Cherry Cosmo from Door County Distillery. Cheers, Rob.
Cheers.
Tastes like summer to me.
Visit DoorCountyDistillery.com to find the retailer nearest you, as well as a huge list of unique cocktail recipes. That's DoorCountyDistillery.com.
Maybe we'll get a little Cherry Cosmo action this weekend. That looks good. It looks refreshing. It's Friday, baby. Let's party. Beautiful weekend in Wisconsin. Can't wait. All right, let's get into this. 10 players, as we're 10 days away from Packers training camp. 10 players with the most to prove as we get into training camp. 10 players on here, all for different reasons. And while the video stream shows number 10, Jordan Love, Hunter, believe it or not, Jordan Love not on this list.
I'm
I
not
imagine
surprised.
You believe that. No, he
Yeah.
shouldn't be on this list. He's got nothing to prove. When it comes to the regular season, if we do this list with the regular season, he might be number 1, right? Like, I still think he should have a chip on his shoulder, prove to everybody it's not a fluke. But when it comes to this list, we're going to talk about a bunch of guys for different reasons. So let's get right into it. From 10 to 1, I even power ranked them for you. Number 10 on my list is the rookie safety drafted in the second round by the Packers, Javon Bullard. He is expected to be the other starting safety across from Xavier McKinney. I just think, hey, he's got the opportunity to say, hey, I belong. I was drafted in the second round. Goody drafted another defensive player from Georgia for a reason. Javon Bullard is number 10 on this list. I just want to make sure he belongs. Because if we get to, let's say, I don't know, week 1, and they've got AJJ back there, the 7th-round pick from a year ago at Iowa State, Anthony Johnson Jr., across from Xavier McKinney, that probably tells you things aren't going as smoothly as you had hoped. Javon Bullard brings a ton of speed. He brings power. He brings hard hitting. He's a good ball hawk. Like, he brings a lot of good skills to the NFL. I'd like to see those pop off right away. Javon Bullard, number 10 on my list. Number 9, not Jordan Love, but his backup from a season ago. Sean Clifford is number 9 with the most to prove on my list because I don't think the Packers are going to carry 3 quarterbacks. And rumor has it Michael Pratt out of Tulane, who the Packers drafted this year, he's got it. He's got some stuff. I know Goody really likes Sean Clifford, but I don't think he likes him enough to carry 3 quarterbacks. I think Sean Clifford has the 9th most to prove this training camp. Number 8 is Davante Wyatt, another former first-round pick. Well, not another former first-round pick, but another draft pick. He was a first-round pick out of Georgia. Javon Bullard wasn't. Quay Walker, Davante Wyatt, drafted a couple years ago in the first round, both out of Georgia by Goody. Davante Wyatt's going to get the reps in the regular season. He will likely be a starter on the defensive line. But you've got to prove it to me. Like, we need to see Davante Wyatt take that next step because for the last 2 years, he just hasn't. He's had some moments, he's had some flashes, but just, He's a replaceable defensive lineman. And when you put a first-round investment in a guy like that, you expect them to help Kenny Clark anchor that defensive line. So if from left to right it is Preston Smith, Davante Wyatt, Kenny Clark, and Rashawn Gary, it's pretty evident who the weakest link is. Don't let that be the case. Davante Wyatt, number 8 on the list. 7th is weird, but I'll get to my reasoning. Number 7 is Grant DuBose, the now second-year wide receiver. DuBose was hurt early in last year, didn't really play a lot, wasn't on the active roster for most of the year. But late in the season, you saw some of those fringe roster wide receivers take that next step when you look at Malik Heath. Remember the Bo Melton game against Minnesota? Those are going to be likely wide receivers 5 and 6. Behind the obvious 4 of Watson, Dobbs, Reed, and Wicks, it's probably Heath and Melton. Will the Packers carry 7 receivers? I don't think so, but maybe. If Grant DuBose does something spectacular in training camp and in the preseason, I think DuBose can win a roster spot. But otherwise, it's probably sayonara, thanks for your time, for Grant DuBose. He's Packer number 7 with the most to prove to me. Number 6, the linebacker position is an interesting one. Quay Walker's your lead dog. But who's number 2? The Packers draft Edgerrin Cooper, but they have liked what they've seen out of Isaiah McDuffie in years past. He's now kind of a veteran on this team, been around for several years. Isaiah McDuffie is number 6 for me. I think he can win the starting spot. with Quay Walker. And obviously there's going to be rotations. You'll see Edrin Cooper. You might even see a little Tyron Hopper, who is another mid-round pick for the Packers this year out of Missouri. I'm really intrigued to see what Isaiah McDuffie does, because I think it could kind of be a make-or-break camp for him, right? Does he become a starter? Does he really solidify himself there? Because he's always kind of been a fringe starter the last few years, it feels, at that linebacker position. Can he be a solidified starter for the Green Bay Packers in 2024? Isaiah McDuffie, number 6. Now, these top 5 are interesting. Number 5 is the first-round pick from this year. It's Jordan Morgan, the tackle out of Arizona. I don't think Jordan Morgan, actually, I really don't think Jordan Morgan will be a starter come week 1 in Brazil. I think he will be a depth piece for the offensive line this year. It's a guy that's been on the show a few times who was the same way until he was sprung into action. Brian Bulaga, he was a first-round pick. He didn't start week 1. But they liked him enough. When Tausch went down, Bulaga was in, they win a Super Bowl. And at the time, Bulaga was the youngest player to win a Super Bowl. Jordan Morgan, similarly to what I brought up with Javon Bullard, like, let's see you can do it. And he could potentially win a starting spot. I just don't think it'll happen. I think Rasheed Walker will be the starting left tackle. But there could be a point in the season where they go, all right, Jordan, it's time to cut you loose. Let's see what you got. And I think this training camp is going to be very, very vital when it comes to what his role is in 2024. Because I still think 3 months removed, that was one of those picks in the NFL draft for the Packers, Jordan Morgan was, where you looked at it and you go, I don't really get it. I don't really get it. I still don't really get it. I don't mind it. I don't think it's a bad pick. But I still think he has a lot to prove in 2024. So Jordan Morgan, number 5 on this list. Number 4, we stay with the offensive line. It is the center. It is Josh Myers. Josh Myers entering the final year of his contract. There's been whispers of maybe they'll try the idea of shuffling around that offensive line to the point where maybe Jordan Morgan does find himself in the starting lineup. Could Zach Tom be a better fit at center, and you figure out what to do at right tackle? Could Elton Jenkins be a center? Is Jordan Morgan, can he play left guard? I think there are a lot of question marks around the sustainability of Josh Myers as your starting center. He's fine. I wouldn't say he's good. Maybe he has good days, but he's definitely not a great center. He's not Corey Linsley. He's not Jeff Saturday. He's not even like Evan Dietrich Smith, who had a couple years as the starter for the Packers. I think Josh Myers has a lot to prove, because I remember last offseason, there was erratic snaps. There wasn't a lot of good rapport between him and Love early. That bled into the regular season a little bit. I remember that game. I think it was against Denver. There was a snap right over Love's head on a crucial 3rd down, and that was the play. Josh Myers is number 4 on my list of most to prove. I think the top 3 could go in any order. I have an offensive player, I have a defensive player, and at number 3, I have a special teams player. It is the kicker, Anders Carlson. I don't know what needs to be said about Anders Carlson needing to prove he belongs. His rookie season was not good. They bring in Greg Joseph. They bring in that other guy from Detroit whose name I always forget. There's 3 kickers entering camp. Only one of them was a draft pick of the Green Bay Packers a year ago. Only one of them was the starting kicker a year ago. This is clearly not a Giorgio Tavecchio, Mason Crosby situation from a decade ago. This is clearly a best man is going to win. And if it ain't Anders Carlson, I think Goody will break his habit of hanging on to draft picks too long. He'll finally kick that habit. But if Anders Carlson can get it right, which admittedly he hasn't really been able to do. It's not like he was an outstanding kicker at Auburn. He had a really rough final year at Auburn. So the fact he was even a draft pick a year ago was concerning. And then the issues prevailed, especially towards the end of the regular season into the postseason. I think the stat is he missed a kick in 8 of the final 10 games. He's got a ton to prove. It's his job to lose, and he could certainly lose it in training camp. Packer with most to prove, number 2, is a cornerback, Eric Stokes. And look, I think he can be a starter. I think, the words that have been spoken about him this offseason is he's healthy. It seems like he's okay. It seems like he's good to go. And he's returned to form. Now, as a number 2 corner, that's not a bad problem to have. Eric Stokes is a reliable corner if healthy. A, you need to prove you're healthy. And B, you need to prove you're not behind a guy like Carrington Valentine, who had a strong rookie year a year ago with all the injuries. The Packers moved on from Rasul Douglas. I think that's a move they still regret. Because when Rasul Douglas was traded to the Bills, the Packers were not a playoff team. They were not a team in good shape. They were not a team that was ready to take that next step until they were, after Rasul Douglas left. Carrington Valentine got a ton of reps as a number one corner when Jair Alexander was hurt. But he's a 7th-round pick. Can Eric Stokes be that true number 2 corner, or does he honestly become a trade piece this offseason? I think if he proves he's a true number 2 option, they hang on to him. If he's behind the 8 ball when it comes to guys like Carrington Valentine and Corey Ballantyne, and I know there's a 7th-round pick rookie out of Penn State, Callan King is his name, that the Packers were really excited they got in the 7th round. So what if Eric Stokes is all of a sudden like your 3rd or 4th best corner? I think he gets traded. So I think his destiny relies a lot on what occurs here in training camp. So Eric Stokes is number 2 for me. Hunter, before I tell you number 1, I'm going to give you the opportunity to guess number 1. Is there a name I haven't said that you think belongs on this list?
I mean, I do have a couple of names that I thought you would specifically bring up. I did see the list, so I want to just have a little bit of integrity there.
Okay, fair point.
But the names that I thought you were going to bring up on here, I thought you were going to specifically have Edrin Cooper, because I think he has an opportunity to win a starting job, because odds are they're only going to be really using 2 linebackers. So I thought he'd have a chance to be alongside Quay Walker. I thought he'd be like a 10-7 spot on your ranking.
So I mean, honestly, Hunter, I almost view number 6, which was Isaiah McDuffie. That's almost an Isaiah McDuffie / Edrin Cooper, right? Because maybe Isaiah McDuffie has a good camp, but Edrin Cooper is just popping off the page, right? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you have a really good problem at linebacker. So I'm with you. I think that's a name I considered. McDuffie was just a little bit more intriguing to me as the veteran, and I know it's a new scheme, it's a new defense, so I understand why you would think that. But if he's a mid-round pick, if he doesn't look like a starter day one, I guess he was a second-round pick, but if he doesn't look like a starter day one, I'm probably not losing sleep over that because I'm comfortable with Isaiah McDuffie as that second linebacker. So I appreciate your thought on it, but that would be my reasoning why not. Number 1 on my list, A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon is a tricky one for me. And we talked at length about this on State of the Packers with Jason Wilde and Gabe Neitzel. He's brought back on like the weirdest contract ever. It's essentially like just above a veteran's minimum. He's making like $1 million this year. Nothing, which is nothing. That's pennies in NFL terms. He is absolutely a fan favorite. He is terrific in the community. He's an awesome dude. So personally, I got nothing against A.J. Dillon. I think he is an all-time great Packers cult hero. Last year, he had the golden opportunity to be the number 1 back while Aaron Jones dealt with injuries for a majority of the season. He had 0 100-yard games. I don't even think he had an 80-yard game. He had a decent year rushing, but that's because he was fed the ball so much. His yards per carry were like 3.5, if that. It might have been 3.4 yards per carry, which is brutal in the NFL. I guess if you give him 3 carries, that's technically a first down, but barely. He's got a lot to prove. And they draft Marshawn Lloyd. They like Emmanuel Wilson. And obviously you have Josh Jacobs. There's no way you're carrying 4 running backs on this 53-man roster. And I think ultimately spot 53 will be between Emmanuel Wilson and A.J. Dillon. And A.J. obviously you can't, but I don't think you can put Emmanuel Wilson on the practice squad. I think he'll get nabbed up. I think he proved some stuff in the postseason that I did not know he was capable of. He actually made me say out loud, Emmanuel Wilson did. Emmanuel Wilson, I apologize. I was not familiar with your game. So A.J. Dillon, I think, is the Packer with the most to prove this training camp. Curious if you think I missed any names. Feel free to chime in ESPN Madison, ESPN Milwaukee on YouTube, ESPN Madison on Facebook, or if you're listening to the audio side, shoot me a tweet. I miss anybody? At Alex_Strouf, STROUF. Your way to get at me that way. Hunter, any other names on your list that I missed?
I would have included Keyshawn Nixon. I understand what he brings on the special teams end of things, but I feel like he was a guy that he's battling to get playing time on defense. And I think with the way that rosters get constructed now, I think it's going to be harder and harder for him to just keep a roster spot if he's not proving that he can get used when they have to go to nickel and dime sets on defense, which they're going to have to do a lot, especially with the Bears being in that division and the Vikings, that he's got to try and prove that he deserves playing time on defense as well, because his special teams, he had that one great year, but he hasn't been living up to that consistently enough. So he's, again, one of those, I would have put him early on the list, but I think that 10 to 7 spot.
I would just say, he's probably, and I wouldn't even say probably, he's probably I will say probably, I guess. He's probably their best nickel corner, just because, I don't know that Jair would ever really play that spot. And you mentioned it earlier, right? They're going to be playing a lot of nickel defense. It's pretty much the base defense in the NFL these days, right? Technically, the Packers are moving to a base 4-3, which is 4 defensive linemen, three linebackers, 2 corners, 2 safeties. It's technically their base defense, but nickel defense is more your base, right? So that's 5 defensive backs, and he'd be the 5th. He got some time last year, and look, I would honestly debate, Hunter, that nickel corner is the hardest position to play well in the NFL. Behind, obviously, quarterback. I would say nickel corner is probably second. Tight end third.
It is.
It's hard because, and here's the thing with nickel corner too, is when you have a good one, you don't let them go. That's why the free agency market is never around on nickel corners, and that's why the Packers bring back Keyshawn Nixon this offseason. I think it's an interesting name because the other part of that too, and you mentioned what he brings to special teams. Let's not forget the NFL is changing their kickoff rules this year. It's going to be more returner friendly. So Keyshawn Nixon, by far, has a spot on this team, and most of these names on this list, other than maybe A.J. Dillon, have a spot on this team, and Sean Clifford maybe the other one that might not. I would be, I don't think he cracks the top 10, but it's a fair thought, right? Can he become a true stud at the nickel corner spot? Because only a few teams have them, right? Few teams have a true stud at nickel corner because it's so hard to play well. And when you do, you lock him up. Example one is Trent McDuffie in Kansas City. He was a free agent this offseason. If I'm not mistaken, I think he was that was the first deal the Chiefs got done this offseason was Trent McDuffie. So it's a tough position. And so I get your point. I'm not trying to make excuses for him.
No,
but yeah.
I just think that, while it is a tough position, it's also a position you see teams trying to rotate guys into a lot. So I just think he's got to prove, hey, we know it's a tough position, but I'm the guy to play this tough position the best. And I don't know if he's always done that. I don't expect him to lock down a slot receiver. That's not what you're expecting from that position. But I just feel like there were times where he was not in the best position defensively last year, and that's something that I think Jeff Hafley and the other coaches know. So he may be on a spot of hey, maybe not this year, but if you don't show up this season, next year you may not be wearing green and gold.
Interesting. It's an interesting thought. I don't think you're wrong. Yeah. I don't know. The fun part about training camp too is and we've talked about this before. There's always the training camp sweetheart. We all remember the Ladarius Gunter game against the Atlanta Falcons when Julio Jones went crazy in the NFC Championship game. I think that would have been the 2016 season. And Gunter ended up getting locked on Julio Jones, and it was atrocious. But in training camp, everybody was like, whoa, who is this Ladarius Gunter guy? Who is this? He is unbelievable. He's making plays. He's picking off Rodgers. Who is this? And ultimately that ended as more of a sad story because he got shredded in the NFC Championship and was never heard from again. So I don't know. Maybe, there's going to be names that pop up during training camp that you've never heard of that end up making the roster, and then maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. And maybe Keyshawn Nixon's one of those with this new kickoff rules. Because I imagine, Hunter, they're going to be practicing that. You got to get used to these new kickoff rules. So I'm intrigued to see what that looks like in training camp because they do kick returning drills but usually they're pretty like stripped down. You don't really have like a full 11 on 11. I remember one of my early training camp memories, not early, but this was over a decade ago. DeJuan Harris was a running back for the Packers, and he was built, man. Like he was thick, he was beefed up, like he was a massive back. And he had a good, I don't remember what year that would have been, but he was kind of brought on late at the end of the season. Running back injuries were just nonstop for the Packers one year. And then he had like a nice little end of season. The following camp, he was practicing kickoff returns. It was like, this makes no sense unless you want him to run straight through people, which maybe that would make sense. Anyway, I'm rambling, but I'm curious what that looks like at training camp. We'll find out on July 22nd. All right, there's your Packers. 10 players with the most to prove come training camp. Let's go on to this now. Paul Skeens has been a phenomenon in the MLB. He was terrific at LSU, won a national championship, is dating the most the highest earning NIL athlete so far in all of collegiate athletics, which is Livy Dunn. She's a gymnast at LSU. So he's gotten a ton of pub based on, obviously, his terrific career at LSU. His relationship is very public. And now he's in the MLB, gets named to his first All-Star game, I think after only like 5 or 6 starts. Skeen started yesterday just up the road at AmFam Field against the Milwaukee Brewers, and he pitched 99 pitches in 7 full innings, allowed 0 hits. So he had a no-hitter going, and then he was pulled. Brewers get a hit in the 8th. They break up the team no-hitter, but ultimately lose to the Pirates 1-0. I was here, right? Like I was producing Kyle Bruston Nortman when this was going on, and I'm kind of thinking to myself 2 ways, right? Like, I kind of want to see it happen. I kind of want to see this rookie phenomenon, throw his first no-hitter, make some history. He's already made a ton of history in terms of strikeouts and efficiency and just being this unbelievable pitcher in his first season. He's made all sorts of history. There's so many stats that like belong to Paul Skeens and nobody else. I kind of wanted to see it happen. But the obvious issue that I was having with that is I don't want it to happen against my team. It can be any of the other 28 teams. I'd be rooting for them. But it's happening against the Brewers. And ultimately, it didn't end up happening. He got pulled from the game, which I hate that, by the way. I understand why teams are scared and like don't want to put too much pressure on an arm on July 11th. But I wonder what Paul Skeens thinks, and he probably talked about it. Was he irritated he got pulled? Was he cool with it? He's got to pitch in the All-Star game on Tuesday. I don't know. I was kind of rooting for the no-hitter. Like, not adamantly, like, yeah, Paul. But more like, I wouldn't mind seeing this happen. It's the middle of July. You still have a lead in the division. I didn't mind it. Am I a bad fan for that, Hunter?
Absolutely you are. It doesn't matter what the situation is. It doesn't matter what's going on. You cannot be okay with a pitcher having a no-hitter against your team. You can't have it. Anytime. If you are witnessing a perfect game by the other team, you want it broken up because then your team is at least remembered for breaking up a perfect game. You can never want something like that to happen to your team, ever.
I agree if it's any other pitcher in the league. The 2 exceptions are Shohei Ohtani, who I know isn't pitching right now, and Paul Skeens. Those would be the 2 names where I go, well, we could be a part of a trivia question. Who did Paul Skeens throw his first no-hitter against in 2024? The Milwaukee Brewers.
No. Nope. Want it to be the Chicago Cubs then. Anybody else? No. Do not want it to be my team. Don't want my team associated with any type of trivia that means somebody was perfect or near perfect like that. Ever.
Which team allowed Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers to score 50 points in his playoff debut?
Exactly. It sucks. I'm going to remember that forever. It's the worst.
For those of you that are not familiar, Hunter, of course, a Dallas Cowboys fan. So I like using that one against them. I hope they meet up again this year, Hunter. I don't know if I've told you this. I want to see a path in the playoffs where the Packers are the 1 seed. In the second round, they host the Cowboys. They beat the Cowboys again by scoring 60 points this time. And then they play the San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship game. That would be my ideal Packers situation for the season because that means they won 13 games. They beat the Cowboys in the divisional round, and then they play the Niners. Like, that would just be the perfect route. So much history between the 3 of those teams, too. Packers, Cowboys, Niners.
Why? Like, You could just want the Packers to get the NFC Championship game, and it doesn't have to go through the Cowboys. You don't have to do that to me. Like, I've had that happen to me so many times.
I do, though.
No, like, that's just mean. Like, you're a bad friend now.
No, that's not true. That's not
It's
true.
very true.
I mean, sports does not equal friends, man. Like, me rooting for the Packers to beat the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys are going to be good. That's me giving you a compliment. I'm saying they're going to be in the divisional round. That's a whole round further than they made it a year ago. That's making me a good friend, actually. I think you're looking at this backwards. Dak and Mike McCarthy getting one step closer.
Yeah, one step closer. That's not going to save their jobs. They're both going to get their asses fired anyways then. They lose in the divisional round. That does nothing for me. Then it's a rebuild and everything starts over.
Hold on. Dak's not going to get fired. He's going to go make way more money elsewhere, probably.
Yeah, that's great, but not with the Cowboys. And then they have to try and figure out if Trey Lance is the guy, and then they're going to have a brand new head coach, and it's just going to be a mess. And it's going to suck.
Well,
because
Lance
then I can't listen to
Nick. We all know that.
Yeah, but there's some feelings that maybe he had some technique things. Yeah. There's some feelings around people that follow the Cowboys that they think that maybe McCarthy's figured out some technique things similarly to Aaron Rodgers when he was coming in, that could have been why he wasn't doing well with the 49ers. So maybe, but it's, again, he's got to actually play some games. But no, like, that's going to suck. And it's just going to be awful. And, like, you're a bad friend and you're a bad fan.
All right, whatever. Speaking of, actually, that was a horrible transition. I was going to say, speaking of a bad man, maybe Pat Murphy. So, Hunter, bring me up to speed on this, because I did see the video, but I forgot what the T-shirt said. So, all of the Undaunted, that's what they said. So, the Brewers are wearing Undaunted T-shirts prior to their game a few days ago against the Pittsburgh Pirates, and Pat Murphy was asked, why are you wearing shirts that say Undaunted? And Pat Murphy, I believe this is actually part 5, Hunter, of our Wisconsin's Dad series. You actually might know better than me. It might be part 4.
It's part 4.
We've been listening to Pat Murphy, the Brewers' new manager, first-year manager, listening to the insane things he says, the hilarious things he says, all the in-betweens. Pat Murphy talking about why the Brewers were wearing shirts pregame that said Undaunted on them. Here's the Brewers skit.
What does undaunted mean? Not intimidated or discouraged by difficulty, danger, or disappointment. So like Bryce Terrain after the All-Star snub, then you remain undaunted.
I love that he called it an All-Star snub. Hunter, is there a way you could just show a screenshot from that video on the screen real quick? Because there are like 3 things I want to point out. You don't have to play the video again. I just want to see what's behind Pat Murphy as they are at his desk. Because, so if you look, you see a sign that says, Undaunted, not intimidated or discouraged by difficulty, danger, or disappointment. Right to the right of him there, you see that. So, given the actual dictionary definition, he just looked up on his phone. It was actually directly behind him the entire time. That's point 1. Now, just below that sign that says Undaunted, not intimidated or discouraged by difficulty, danger, or disappointment, is a captain's hat. Because coming up, I believe it's on the 26th, so next Friday, or 2 Fridays from today, actually 2 weeks from today, it is a Yacht Rock night at AmFam Field, and they are giving away those captain's hats with the Brewers logo on it. So Pat Murphy, who I guarantee is a big Yacht Rock guy, already has his Yacht Rock hat. And beneath the Yacht Rock hat is a book that says Coaching Baseball for Dummies. Directly beneath the Yacht Rock hat. Coaching Baseball for Dummies in the office of the Brewers manager, who is in first place and has the 3rd best record in the entire National League. On his desk in his office, next to his cheater glasses that he probably picked up from a Dollar General, and beneath his captain's hat from a Yacht Rock night, Pat Murphy has the book Coaching Baseball for Dummies on his desk. How can't you love this guy? coaching baseball for dummies. He's not a dummy. I'll tell you that much. I will tell you that much. The Brewers are undaunted, although they are kind of stumbling their way into the All-Star break here. As I mentioned at the top, they dropped a 3-game series, 2-1 to the Pittsburgh Pirates. They're still 14 games above 500. They are still in first place of the NL Central. That lead is just not as cushy as it once was, but the Cardinals lost again, so it's still 5 games. But got to get right this week against the Nationals. They got 3 games left before the break, starting tonight at AmFam Field against the Washington Nationals. So we will see what happens when we return Monday. We will be in the All-Star break. Home run derby time on Monday, All-Star game on Tuesday. It's weird that the ESPYs weren't on the same week as the MLB All-Star game this year, but it was a good presentation last night. I'll talk to you about that in just a second. But Hunter, as we always do, you learn something new every day. You learned something new today. And did I hear you right when you said you brought props?
Well, I've got some video from a podcast that Doug Flutie was on. So I've talked about
Doug
before.
Flutie?
Yeah. Quarterback for Boston College. Really great college quarterback as well as a good quarterback in the NFL. And he was talking about his famous Hail Mary play. So I wanted to play this for you because I found this absolutely fascinating.
Really cool twist came up. I threw it to the wrong guy. 35th anniversary of the pass, right? I'm doing interviews about it and see a different camera angle. For 35 years, my tight end, who was the backup tight end at the time, was in the game because the starter had a sprained ankle. And there was an inadvertent whistle. I go, hey, they're only rushing 3. Get wide. Go long down the boundary. I was going to roll right and launch it. Just in case, if they drift, I might peek backside and hit you down the back rail. We get in the locker room after the game. He's like, we had a shot. For 35 years, I hear. 35 years, I hear, we had a shot. We had a shot. I saw a different camera angle. Pete is all by him. I have a picture on my phone. Pete is all by himself at the 10-yard line on the backside when the ball's in the air. Backside corner. The guy that was supposed to be over there is 30 yards away from his man. Pete would have been a walk-in on the backside. I threw it to the wrong guy. 35 years later, right? I call.
So, yeah, one of the greatest moments in college football history, and Doug Flutie actually threw it to the wrong guy, but it still worked out for him.
Did work out all right. That's funny. That was a good story. Shout out to Doug Flutie. That is a name I have not heard in a hot minute. Seriously, I don't remember the last time somebody said the name Doug Flutie to me. When's the last time you thought about Doug Flutie, Hunter, prior to this?
Well, every year, a tradition I have going into the college football season is I watch a documentary going through the history of college football and some of the best moments. And literally the first thing is that Hail Mary to Gerard Phelan in the back of the end zone. I believe it was Brett Musburger was on the call for that game. And the only reason that he says Phelan in the call is because one of the guys in the production truck was a huge Boston College fan and knew who caught it based off of seeing the number. Otherwise, he had no idea who caught it. He just knew that somebody caught it and there was a mob in the end zone. Yeah. So I think about Doug Flutie every year then. It's like a tradition for me.
You're just a Doug Flutie guy. We should get you a Doug Flutie jersey is what we should do.
Short King Doug Flutie.
Right, Short King Doug Flutie, indeed. You learn something new every day. I watched the ESPYs last night, as I just mentioned. We're not on the same week, as the MLB All-Star Game for, I feel like, the first time in a long time. I always feel like that lined up. But I just learned it was a bad year to be born for Wisconsin volleyball star Sarah Franklin, who was a finalist for the Best Collegiate Women's Athlete last night at the ESPYs. Sarah Franklin, National Player of the Year, was part of debatably the best volleyball team in the country. Didn't win the national championship last year, but still terrific postseason run, amazing regular season, breaking barriers when it comes to women's sports. And, you know who won that award, Hunter? Caitlin Clark won that award.
Shocker.
Tough year to be born for Sarah Franklin, who gets another year, though, at Wisconsin. Maybe this will be her award to win next year. But tough year to be born for Sarah Franklin, who was a finalist, but super well-deserved and thrilled for our new partnership with Wisconsin Volleyball on 100.5 ESPN Madison and 620 WTMJ. Your new home for Wisconsin women's volleyball starting this fall. And Sarah Franklin back for one more year. Devin Robinson, our teammate and friend, also back for one more year. Going to be an exciting year for the Wisconsin women's volleyball team, which gets started in about a month and a half. Can't wait for that. But the ESPYs were great, dude. I thought Serena was great. Venus made a little cameo. They roasted Harrison Butker at one point, who was in attendance by himself, which was really funny to me. They were doing a little bit of a, I want to say almost like a speech on women's sports and what, they're just sports, right? You don't need to call it women's sports, it's just sports. You refer to them as athletes and champions. And they made a joke that you can call them a dumbass if they're a dumbass, right? And then at the end of that speech, they go, except for Harrison Butker, we don't want you. And he was in the crowd. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. I enjoyed that, though. Anyway. Yeah, it was great. It was great. All right, that'll do it for us today. Thanks to Hunter for running the show. As always, we're back with you Monday beginning at 12:30 on the ESPN Madison, ESPN Milwaukee YouTube channels. Molly Brown, ahead of the debut of Jim, Matt, and Molly, will join us on Monday from the Everlate Solar Studio. New show on ESPN Madison beginning on Monday. Molly Brown, Jim Rutledge, Matt Hamilton. We will talk to you then. Have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe. Make decent decisions. I'll try to do the same. We'll talk to you Monday. It's Mr. Relevant. I'm Alex Strouf. Peace.